This video is brought to you by Raycon True Wireless Earbuds, who are offering huge savings ahead of the holiday season. Stick around to hear more about them, as well as the special offers they're making available through my channel. Evil West comes from developer Flying Wild Hog, who have had a very busy year. A few months back, they put out Trek to Yomi, a 2D narrative-led samurai game that wasn't a particularly great game, but it was beautifully framed, loving homage to that era of Kurosawa cinema. A few months before that, they put out Shadow Warrior 3, a first-person shooter that obviously draws a lot from the Doom formula, but strikes a far less self-serious tone. This one met middling reviews owing to some technical challenges and the fact that it felt a little derivative in the modern era. I wonder if Flying Wild Hog's latest release, Evil West, might meet the same fate. This is a linear, mission-based, third-person melee action game where you move from arena to arena, punching and shooting vampires until there's no vampires left to punch or shoot. Throw in some light puzzles, some flashy cutscenes, repeat for 16 missions over roughly 10 hours, and that's the game. Unremarkable by any standard in which innovation is a primary metric, but let me tell you, Evil West, absolute banger. So Evil West is not going to forever change the landscape of video games. It's not going to win a BAFTA. No one's going to write a book about it. Evil West will leave no cultural footprint because it's not trying to. It's just trying to be a straight up cowboy versus vampires action game. It's the video game equivalent of like Zombieland. That movie rules, right? Did it win any Oscars? No. But if I said to you, hey man, come over and we'll eat some pizza and watch Zombieland, you'd be like, fuck yeah man, I love that movie. And pizza. That's Evil West. Top tier popcorn cinema and pizza. But just because Evil West is unlikely to spawn a new subgenre of video game analysis essay doesn't mean that there isn't a huge amount going on under the hood here to make it work as well as it does. This game has some top tier sound design. Its presentation factor is punching so far above its weight that I'm always wondering how much it would have cost to make all these cutscenes. It's visually spectacular, achieving a tremendous sense of place in each of its distinct locations. It's technically flawless, running at a rock solid 60 FPS at 4K on an RTX 2080 Ti. It has fantastic enemy design and lots of it, and the combat is just excellent, and it gets better and better at regular intervals as new upgrades become available that meaningfully expand your ability to express yourself and play your way. Plus, the difficulty tuning is pitch perfect, and oh man, there's just so many things. In many ways, Evil West feels quaint. It has a lot of Xbox 360 energy. There's no live service, no in-game spending, no open world, no elaborate RPG systems, no thought-provoking narrative. It's just a gruff dude, some cutscenes, and some levels. For many, that won't be enough. They'll want something bigger, more elaborate, more ambitious, more innovative. That's fine. I like all that stuff too. But I also like it when a game aims at just a few things and then nails every single one of them. That is what Evil West is doing, and it's such a great surprise, and I love it. Quick look at technical stuff. I tested Evil West on two PCs, an RTX 2080 Ti with an AMD Ryzen 7 3700X, and a Steam Deck. On the Steam Deck, it runs surprisingly well. At low settings with no AMD FSR support, it can run at around 60 FPS, and it looks pretty good while doing it. The problem is that it does fluctuate a lot when the action heats up, and AMD FSR does help level it out, though it does result in a significantly degraded image, even when set to quality mode. But there's lots you can do to tinker with this. Base settings, FPS caps, AMD FSR, whatever your tolerance is for some fluctuations, you can tinker with it until it feels right for you. Bottom line though, it's more than playable on Steam Deck. I still don't recommend playing most graphically intensive games on deck, but at a pinch, it's a decent offering and you will certainly be able to enjoy this game on Valve's handheld. On PC, I was genuinely blown away by how well this ran. So as I've said many times before, the 2080 Ti is not really a 4K card. It sits most comfortably at 1440p. Still, I always like to test 4K to see how it goes. Sure enough, I was able to hit a solid 45 frames a second with everything set to max, running at 4K resolution. And I was like, huh, that's interesting. Then I noticed that the game also supports various upscaling technologies, including AMD FSR and NVIDIA DLSS, so I turned on DLSS, set it to performance, and at that point, I was enjoying an absolutely rock-solid 60 FPS the entire time. Even when the action was super thick with lots of enemies on the field and particle effects galore, that frame rate held, making for a truly superb feeling experience. I had zero bugs and zero crashes the entire time. A technically flawless experience, at least for me, and one that actually exceeded my expectations, and that is pretty much the only game that I've played this year that I can say that of. This PC performance actually makes the console target frame rates and resolutions all the more puzzling. On Series S, it's a disappointing 1080p 30 FPS, and on PS5 and Series X, it's 4K at 30 FPS or 1080p at 60 FPS. This is a huge bummer. The developer claimed that they tried everything to get it running at a smooth 60 at 4K on those next-gen consoles, but couldn't do it. I don't know, man, this is just a big surprise to me given how good performance was on PC. I don't understand it, and I hope they're able to circle back and deliver at least 1440p at 60 FPS, because if the PC performance is any yardstick, then surely that's possible. Visually, Evil West isn't the best looking game I've seen, but I still think it's pretty damn good looking. Your character detail is top notch, as are enemy designs. Combat is full of particle effects that dynamically light up the action. Environments are expansive and dripping with detail most of the time. The lighting effects within each level are particularly effective, transforming spaces as you move through them, so that something as simple as a cornfield can take on an increasingly menacing tone as you move from one end of it to the other, and the lighting shifts from dull moonlight to a blood-soaked red, presaging a final showdown. The levels here are actually a standout feature of the game. I love this level design. Evil West is a pulpy spaghetti western with vampires thrown in, and it seesaws back and forth between those inspirations across its 16 levels. One level is a train robbery gone wrong, and you're picking through the remains of a derailed locomotive. The next level is an underground vampire temple carved into stone and inverted pyramids and all that sort of shit. All manner of tropey cowboy location is here, from dusty towns to sawmills to oil fields. But then you get to this giant swamp covered in leeches who are all feeding on the remains of an ancient blood god buried just beneath the surface. And then there's this whole Nikola Tesla thing going on, where so much of the technology that powers your house of vampire hunters is old-timey electrical contraptions that got their start in a cliffside laboratory purpose-built to harvest lightning. So much imagination in each of these spaces, so much detail, all of it paying homage to the various schlocky comic book serialized B-grade renditions of vampires and cowboys. Like the rest of the game, none of it is original per se, but it's authentic, and it's so well done, and each of the 16 levels truly earns its place for the unique story that the setting tells.
Young Rentier, still on your father's leash, I see.
One of the other big surprises that Evil West delivers is its story, or more specifically, the presentation factor for how that story is told. So the long and the short of it is that vampires, and stop me if this gets too complicated, but vampires are bad, and some cowboys need to kill them, as many times as it takes for them to stay dead. You play as Jesse Rentier of the prestigious House Rentier, an organization government sanctioned and funded to stop the threat of the unliving, whatever form they may take. You work for your father, Old Man Rentier, and he's grooming Jesse for the top spot, which basically involves riding a desk. And Jesse isn't much for that idea, because he knows that his ass belongs not in an office chair, but in a saddle, riding towards the next vampire outbreak so he can curb stomp and dismember as many of them as possible. Anyway, disaster strikes one day at the Rentier mansion, and it falls to Jesse to not only slay the vampire responsible, but save his father in the process. So this is not a great story in the sense that you can guess a lot of what's coming from a mile away, and it's pretty cliche, but it's still cool. It has some twists and turns I wasn't expecting, and most notably, it has some characters who are really memorable and really fun to listen to. Characters you really hate because they're assholes, or characters you want to see more of because they're badasses. All the writing is swinging for the fences all the time, so while most of it can come across a bit goofy, you just get swept up in its earnestness, which I really appreciated.
Got you some wine! What is wrong with you?
Sorry, Chester, force of habit. What did you want to tell us?
But yeah, man, the cutscenes. I wonder how much Flying Wild Hog spent on these. Every mission has a good 2 to 5 minutes of really detailed, high-quality pre-rendered cutscenes, like we used to see back in the day on the 360 or whatever. They look awesome. I love them. I was always so excited when a cutscene would start rolling because I knew I was in for some over-the-top cowboy vampire melodrama, but also because I was going to be in for some visual spectacle. These awesome character designs combined with the production value of these visuals makes for some great eye candy, and I'm not at all ashamed to say that I was super into it. Same goes for the voice acting. There's some great performances here, not Game of the Year nominee worthy, but really cool. Every actor giving the role 110%, and it helps sell the whole package even more. So you've got a story that's going all in on vampires versus cowboys, you've got some great characters voiced by actors who are really chewing the scenery in every moment, and you've got a set of cutscenes that look like Flying Wild Hog just wrote a blank check to their cutscene team and said, go for your life. It's rare that presentation comes together as well as it does here, especially outside the AAA space. This is a AA game after all, but its presentation is punching far above its weight. And no small part of the joy you'll take away from Evil West is just how fun and impressive it is to watch this story unfold. When your work is done at the end of a level and you've beaten the boss, you will be excited for the cutscene that's about to start rolling. Not because it's deep, compelling storytelling, but just because it's fucking cool, and that's more than enough for me. Alright, time for the meat and potatoes, the combat. I had way too much fun with the combat in Evil West, partly because I feel like it's tailor-made for me and what I like. So when I reviewed God of War, I kind of outlined that there were 3 categories for melee combat. Your slow and punishing Souls-like, your fast and expressive character action games, and in between them is God of War, which is very evenly paced, very forgiving in many aspects, and very approachable. You don't need to study God of War's combat to be good at it, and you can produce some pretty amazing combos and spectacle with little effort. It lacks the depth and longevity of other combat systems, but it's fantastic for games where a one-time playthrough is the intent. Evil West combat is very, very analogous to God of War's combat. It has the same offset, over-the-shoulder perspective, it has the same pacing, giving time between each swing to plan your next swing. It hybridizes melee and ranged combat, while also giving you plenty of tools to move across the battlefield quickly or pull targets towards you. It places a huge premium on air juggles, it encourages frequent weapon swapping, and it looks totally badass the entire time, with plenty of finisher animations to keep things feeling bloody and crunchy. I would hazard a guess to say that Flying Wild Hog looked at God of War's combat as their primary inspiration for designing this combat, and if you enjoyed God of War's combat, then you'll almost certainly enjoy this. But if you were someone that found God of War a little too forgiving, a little lacking in depth, then you're absolutely going to arrive at the same conclusions here in Evil West, because as good as it is, it's even more forgiving than God of War, and it also has less depth in terms of weapon variety and combos. But having said all of that, I still loved it. When I play games like this, I'm a one and done kind of guy. I don't want to have to replay them endlessly to suck every last drop of value out of the combat system. I'm there for a good time, not a long time, and Evil West nails its fundamentals so soundly that it is a very, very good time. Combat is divided into melee and ranged attacks. Melee is simple, with one button doing all the punching and finishers automatically kick in. There are different melee moves, however, like a jump forward if you melee while sprinting, or holding the button will initiate an air juggle. Still, it's hardly deep, but it works. Where combat becomes more interesting is with the help of your gauntlet, which is all juiced up and capable of some really wild shit. The most fun is this instant teleport to a distant target move, which also happens to stun them and set them up for a rapid melee combo. This is one of the bread and butter moves for the whole game, since it provides a lot of defensive power. Enemies are often shambling or charging towards you, forcing you into tight spots while range foes hang back. Targeting those range foes with your teleport is your means of getting out of those tight jams, while also herding enemies around the battlefield so you can engage them on your terms. The gauntlet is your shield, but it's only for parrying. Lucky, it is a very generous parry window, and it can also AoE stun enemies. In large part, you're inviting enemies to attack you so that you can parry them, since it sets them up for one of those rapid melee combos as well. The other side of the combat model is ranged attacks, with your 6-shooter, your rifle, your boomstick shotgun, and with other weapons you'll unlock later on. Best to think of these weapons as situational tools rather than straight DPS. The 6-shooter doesn't do a lot of damage, but it can be pulled out really quickly to dispatch foes who are on low health. The rifle is what you'll use when a distant target is somewhere you can't reach, or when an enemy presents a weak point momentarily, since all ranged enemies become vulnerable in the moment they attack. The boomstick is almost like a parry, since firing it at the right moment will not only interrupt enemies, but deal bonus damage. So all of this is really solid stuff, but what makes this work really well is enemy design. Evil West has a huge range of enemies, each of them entirely distinct from one another, and who each leave a very distinct signature on the combat sandbox. There are zombie things that are kind of just fodder. There are cowboys who will draw their revolvers, giving you a window to shoot it out of their hands, or otherwise you'll take a big chunk of damage. There are big tentacle head monster dudes who carry a shield and they charge you with it. There are floating wasps. There's a bee queen who buffs every other enemy on the battlefield. There are zombie cowboys who will channel a healing spell unless it's interrupted. There are werewolves who will buff each other with a howl unless you shoot them quickly. There's so many, and they're all excellent, and they will absolutely push you to use every available tool in your kit. Shooting at ranged targets to interrupt them, teleporting to another one to stun it, dropping a shotgun round into an enemy's shield to break it, AoE parry stunning a clump of zombies so you can harvest their guts for some sustain. This is the central pillar on which this game's awesomeness is built. Outside of a few puzzles, Evil West is only ever the same thing over and over again. It's walking into a combat space and killing shit until there's nothing left to kill. But the enemy design is so strong and the new enemies are introduced with such regularity and the combat fundamentals are so good that it just never gets old. So much work has been put into designing combat encounters with specific combinations of enemies and enemy positions and spawn rates. It's so precisely tuned to always be interesting. It does that thing where you fight a boss and then in the very next level that enemy reappears, but not as a boss, as a standard enemy, and now you have to fight two of them at once. It's really challenging at first, and there are some prickly difficulty spikes along the way, but on the whole, the cadence of new enemies and new enemy combinations is so solid that my frustration would invariably give way to satisfaction as I found new ways to use the tools at my disposal to break through each new encounter. Speaking of new tools, Evil West has a very straightforward but very solid progression system. Again, similar to God of War, you'll poke around the hidden corners of levels to find little caches of bucks, all of which can be spent to upgrade your weaponry, and each new level grants you perk points that can be used to upgrade your character's core kit. Almost every single upgrade is a meaningful upgrade that expands your options during combat. There are the odd node that just provides some bonus damage, but most of the time it's an entirely new thing that you can do, like air juggle enemies with your 6-shooter, or phase between each swing of your melee combo so you can dodge while you're keeping damage up. Just as the enemy variety and enemy combinations continue to become more interesting and more challenging, so too does your kit expand to be more powerful and flexible. Unfortunately, this does cross a threshold in the late game where you have so much power baked into your kit that the careful difficulty tuning is undermined, and the core combat model does descend into a bit of ability dumping, blowing your load as quickly as possible while reverting back to more basic attacks while you wait for stuff to recharge. That only happens late though, and through 4/5 of the game, you're looking at a progression model that does an excellent job of giving you new toys to play with without ever tipping the scales too far in your favor. One last thing I want to shout out is sound design, since it's one of the standout features of this game, expertly crafted to give you a huge amount of useful information at all times, and you will come to rely on this soundscape quite a lot as you're playing. Obviously, the over-the-shoulder, tight-in perspective isn't great for being able to see off-screen threats. Luckily, there's plenty of positional audio coming at you, so you'll typically hear when an enemy is about to attack. Doubly so in the case of interruptible ranged attacks. When an enemy winds up their ranged attack, a sound will play alerting you to the fact that they are now vulnerable, which kind of prompts you to stop what you're doing, pull out your rifle and take a quick shot. The generous amount of auto aim makes it really easy to do that, by the way. The other thing is the distinct sound that enemies make when they're using certain attacks. Those werewolves I mentioned earlier, their howl is prioritized in the sound mix, so you're never going to miss it when they're doing that. Then there's enemy spawns, which are always heralded by a bell toll. You could be in the thick of combat and there's so much going on, but when you hear that bell toll, you know that you need to start looking around for the next threat, because if it's one that you're not paying attention to, it could be the one to immediately put out your lights. Finally, when you've killed every enemy, a quick gunshot sound fires off, which is a small thing, but it's actually super useful because it immediately tells you that the job is done and you can relax. Given how often new enemies will spawn in and how crazy combat often is, that little sound at the end stops you from frantically searching around for additional foes, giving you the confidence to press on into the next arena. In short, some top-tier audio design with a huge amount of thought behind it, and it's a perfect example of how good a job Flying Wild Hog have done with Evil West. They knew what mattered to the experience, they set those things squarely in their sights, and they deliver to a standard that I suspect is going to surprise a bunch of people, because it certainly surprised me. So as I was reviewing this, I was like, this rules, I love it, and I want to strongly recommend it. But there was this niggling voice in the back of my head like, nah, this can't be a strong recommend, this is a recommend, right? This is sort of basic, it's repetitive. Where's the breakthrough thing? Where's the innovation, the genre-bending, genre-redefining X-Factor chutzpah that justifies the strong recommend label? And then I was like, nah, fuck that. This is super cool, this is super fun, I love it. That's what matters most at the end of the day, especially in the case of video games like this, because it has such strong throwback vibes. It is a melee action game that isn't trying to be a Souls-like. It doesn't have any modern gaming bullshit like in-game spending or login servers or whatever. It's just a straight-up video game selling at a discount. It's $50 by the way. And it has co-op, something I was not able to test, but you can play through this entire game with a friend if you like. That is awesome. I love this, and I reckon I would have loved it all the more had I been playing through it with someone else. For me, this lands in the same territory as Remnant from the Ashes or The Ascent. Games that many will find derivative, but I love their focus. I love their commitment to a setting, to core gameplay elements, and to their construction as honest-to-goodness video games that aren't trying to be everlasting platforms, they're just trying to be a good time for a few hours. Evil West is a great time, and that is why I strongly recommend it to you. The hunt for gifts can always be tricky, but you know what people always need? Earbuds. At home, at the gym, out for a walk, at work, you name it. Having a pair of earbuds handy is always going to upgrade your situation. And so you're always going to be happy to get a pair of earbuds for Christmas, right? You're probably thinking, hang on, those are expensive. Hundreds of dollars, right? Often, yes, but what if you could get a pair of high-quality Bluetooth earbuds for less than half the price of other stuff on the market? Enter Raycons. I've been using Raycons for over 2 years and I've always loved them. Their wireless earbuds offer premium sound, useful features, an almost custom, comfortable fit, and up to 54 hours of battery life. Pretty crazy for a set of earbuds that, as I said, are basically half the price of pretty much every other set of earbuds on the market. Raycons also have touch control support, allowing you to do stuff like change volume levels, skip songs, or answer calls easily, and they're sweat and water resistant, meaning they're perfect for high intensity workouts or if you ever find yourself stuck out in the rain. I'm not the only one who loves Raycons, by the way. They have over 50,000 5-star reviews, and best of all, Raycons come with free shipping and a 30-day return policy, so you don't have to take my word for it. Just try them for yourself, and if you aren't happy, you can get your money back. Easy. Click the link in the description below or go to buyraycon.com/skillup and use offer code EARLYBF to get 20% off site-wide, or save even bigger and get 30% off Raycon's exclusive holiday bundles. There will also be different deals coming throughout the season, and I'll try and keep the description box updated with the latest stuff. But just so you know, you can always go to buyraycon.com/skillup to get the best deals available on Raycon. Thanks Raycon for sponsoring the video, and thank you for watching it.